Happy Thursday evening. It's me, Geordie Pete Redding on Hollywood Balls, a new edition of Hollywood Balls as well. And it's a welcome to Hollywood Balls. My next guest, and he's the first guest in our brand new Legends series. Yes, it's me, Geordie Pete, on Hollywood Balls, and it's Hollywood Balls Legends. My next guest predominantly is a legend in the lily white of Spurs, but notable spells as well with Manchester City, Liverpool, Sunderland, and of course the Three Lions. It's a welcome return to Hollywood Balls. Paul Stewart.
Hi, Pete. You okay?
Yes, very well, Paul, and it's fantastic to have you back on. It's been a while.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, a lot's gone on and a lot's happened since we last spoke. I think the word legend is probably used too much. I appreciate the fact that you've said that, but I don't class myself as a sporting legend in any way, shape, or form.
We know you don't, but there's plenty that do, and we've got questions. We've got questions. We've got welcome to everyone from around the world already piling in. Thomason's here. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us, Paul, as well. We got so much to get through, but I wanted to take you back to. Is it fair to say in the beginning that the recognition for your scoring prowess could probably be attributed to Sam Ellis at Blackpool? He knew he had goals in here, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still close friends with Sam. He did bring me up, to be fair, at Blackpool, and he gave me sort of all the tools that I needed. I mean, to be honest with you, initially it was goals that I was lacking in the game. I was playing as a striker. I was, as far as assists go today, I would have been right up there. But when you've got number 9 on your back, and back then,
pressure.
There was pressure to score goals, but he had faith in me. He worked with me. The goals did come, and thankfully, with him keeping the faith with me, it got me my move onto Manchester City. And he always did reassure me that, not to worry about it, because you do think that, or I certainly thought that the time was passing me by. You kept reading in the papers, as you did them days, that such and such a club's looking for you, And no matter what anyone tells you as a player, on a Sunday you went to look at who was watching who. And I just kept seeing that so many clubs were watching me, but nothing was happening. So thankfully, it all came to fruition in the end. And thanks to Sam for really sticking by me.
Manchester City as well. I mean, forget the fact that they played in the second division. One of the highlight games, because it was always exciting, like you say, that players looked at the news to see what other teams were looking, but fans did the same. And I always remember looking at City and thinking, even though they were second division, the goals that they scored, they had yourself and David White, who were so excited. There was one game, I think it was 10-1 against Huddersfield, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, do you know what they had? They had a wealth of young talent there, Pete, at the time. But because of the position they were in, they couldn't afford or weren't afforded the time to develop them youngsters. Do you know, you talk about David White, but you can all talk about as well Paul Simpson, Paul Lake. There's a lad called Steve Redmond, Ian Brightwell, like you said, Whitey. There were so many players there, but I think had they been able to afford the luxury of nurturing them, then they could have done something special. They could have done something special, but City couldn't afford that luxury as Manchester United could. So then they had to keep playing the players, and that was probably not what they needed. They needed to be brought through, rested when it was right to be rested.
It's fascinating to see, but the move up as you go up the ladder, and you again to hark back to those people that are watching. the bigger the club, the more people that are looking from other clubs. And again, the trend continued with the move to Spurs. And Terry Venables, in time, you were signed as a forward there, but in time he saw you as that midfielder, didn't he? Do you think?
To be honest with you, Pete, no, that wasn't the case. I'd love to say it was a bit of genius tactics from Venner's, but it was far from that. What happened? I was playing alongside Gary Lineker, and we played a game. I think it was against Luton Town, and we had a couple of players sent off. Now there was an option of putting me back into midfield or Gary Lineker, and to be honest with you, Gary was never going to go back into midfield. Gary was an out-and-out goal scorer. So by fluke, I went back in, and in that game, I scored 2 goals, got man of the match, and we won. Then the following game, I think it was against Liverpool. I think it was Gaza that may have got sent off. So again, I dropped back into midfield, got man of the match in that game, and that was how I ended up playing in midfield for Spurs. And it wasn't a tactical bit of genius from Venner's.
It was a pattern of red cards, was it?
Yeah, it was. Dangerous play and red cards.
We'll get on to Gaza in a bit, but it's funny you say about Gary Lineker not dropping back. He was one of those. I'd probably class him in the same as another club that you were at Liverpool. Ian Rush. It's just sort of, there's no way you're going to drop those sort of players back, are you?
No, and you know what? I was fortunate and very lucky in my career to play, I think, alongside 2 of the best strikers in the world at the time. There was a difference, and I often get asked the question, who would you say was the better? And I always plump for Ian Rush, and the only reason I do that is, as far as goal scoring was concerned, they were both on a par. The difference with Ian was that when the back 4 of the opposite team got the ball, particularly as centre halves, he had this knack of knowing when to go and nick the ball off them, and he was very much your first line of defence. Whereas Gary, if you were up if you were up against it against Wimbledon or someone like that, he'd be buffing his nails on the halfway line, waiting for something to happen. so that's what edges it for me with Rushy. But in terms of actual putting the ball in the back of the net, they were both on equal par.
I remember seeing Ian Rush as a young lad. I was wide-eyed. I'd just started going to St James's Park in the 80s. And my grandfather was he was a Liverpool fan, and he used to tease me something rotten. And I remember I just had that excitement that young fans do, that we were going to beat Liverpool. They came. It was the first game of the season, and they were going to be on the big match on ITV that night. So I was going to come home and watch Newcastle's famous victory.
Very young to remember that, me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I wish.
And Rushy scored in the first minute. He scored again at half time, and then he scored again in the 89th minute. And I remember coming home, my granddad saying, "Yeah, that's Rushy for you." So, I've got memories of him as well. Speaking of midfield, though, what a midfield Spurs had, by the way.
Yeah,
you mentioned Gaza, but Paul Allen in there as well. Absolutely tremendous workhorse, but what a player he was. And of course, Naeem as well, who was such a gifted player. If only they'd had fantasy football when you were playing, Paul.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what was it like to play in that middle?
I think for me, I mean, I dropped back into that midfield where obviously I was playing alongside, at the time, one of the best players in the world, if not the planet, Gaza. Yep. I just used my head and thought, if I can actually win the ball here, by any means, by the way, I wasn't always fair, but I thought, the tackle. Yeah, win the ball and give it Gaza, whether it be 5 yards, 2 yards, then I knew he'd be able to do something magic with it. And what started to happen, not only did it give me the confidence to do other stuff, but people started then to think, actually, Stewart can play. He can play a bit in midfield, but the gig was the perfect gig for me, because I wasn't frightened of a tackle, get the ball, look for Gaza, and then there'd be some magic that he'd do. And it was just, I feel honoured really to have been a player that can say I actually played alongside Paul when he was at his pomp, when he was at his best, and he was just a pleasure to play alongside.
You can imagine. One of our regular viewers, Thomason, it's good to have you with us. He says, Paul, did you ever consider being a manager at any point? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is no. Travelled about a bit as a player, as you've seen by the clubs that I've been to.
Yeah.
And I quite found it difficult to settle in areas, and my wife did as well.
Sure.
And you were uprooting your kids as a player. And when I finished, I thought, you could move to Torquay, or you could move to Exeter or Bournemouth or whatever, and then 3 weeks later you could find yourself sacked, and you uprooted it. And it was such a nomadic existence, and you'd start at the bottom of the rung of the ladder again. And I just didn't feel that was for me, and I didn't feel that I'd be able then to commit to a club and give it my all, because in the back of your mind you're thinking, is my wife settled? Are my kids all right in school? And am I focused on the football then? So I chose a different path rather than staying in the game. That's not to say I didn't still, the desire and the love for the game was still there.
It's an interesting one because we have guests on Soccer Saturday and of course on Hollywood Balls with TFA who have gone on as from being players into coaching and management. And the question that fascinates me always is, how different is it from being a player? And one that resonates with me is Lee Clark, a good friend of the show, and he says you can spend all week going through tactics, analysing the opposition, doing this, doing that. But when those players go over the white line on a Saturday afternoon, that's the difference.
And I think also you've also got to get the right people around you, haven't you, Pete? Because as a manager, for instance, rather than a coach, you've got to have that separation between manager and player, and therefore you need a really good go-between who can resonate with the players, but also, be the go-between between manager and players. And I think sometimes we underestimate what coaches or assistant managers, the value of them. And, we also see sometimes some great assistant managers or coaches try and become a manager, and it becomes too much for them, and without being disrespectful to anyone on this call, but you look at Arteta now, and you sort of wonder whether he's going to make that transition. He's 3 years in. Arsenal are struggling, and sometimes your vocation may be an assistant manager rather than the top boss.
Interestingly, as well, it's a question that I just thought about: is that a captain has such an important role, not just important, but a quite delicate role, because he has to be one of the boys, but he's got to get that message from, as you've just said, from the coaching staff to the players, but remain respected amongst the boys, so it were. So I think a captain's role as well is pretty difficult, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. And I think I was lucky. I played with some great captains, none more so than Gary Mabbott, who was exemplary on and off the field. But I tell you what, I went on loan to Crystal Palace when I wasn't having the best of times at Liverpool, and they had a young player there, 24 years of age, and he was captain of the team. Now, I was like getting to my 30s, or probably was 30. They brought me in for experience, but he was just exemplary on and off the field. Sometimes when I used to be, and I regret this massively, but sometimes if I hadn't played well, and even if supporters had been waiting outside for a couple of hours for autographs, it was all about me, and I'd ignore them, Pete, and just walk. This lad at 24 years of age, not only was he a great captain, but he knew how to handle himself off the pitch. Now, it's no surprise to me to say to you he's now England manager, Gareth Southgate. And again, he's probably one of the best captains I've played under at a tender age of 24, which you don't normally get that job then.
So he was a leader even way back then.
Yeah.
Going back to Spurs, got to talk about that match in '91. You were man of the match as well, and of course a Wembley goal, which was brilliant. But people will come to you and say you were man of the match and the goal, of course. But the consequences of Gazza's actions that day. So, I mean, how hyper was he before the match? Because he was just literally he was buzzing everywhere, wasn't he? And that came into his play.
Yeah, but Paul was hyper before every game. Pete, honest to God, you know, he was no different on that day. What I think he wanted to do more than anything was because he'd already agreed and the fee was agreed for him to go to Lazio. It was his last game. He'd scored that terrific goal in the semis. There was the hype about Cloughie never winning the only trophy being the FA Cup. Paul was leaving, so it was really matched up as the Gaza Cloughie final. Paul should have got booked for his first rash challenge on Ian Wone.
It was in the chest, wasn't it?
Yeah, somewhere around the neck area. I mean, can you imagine it today?
No.
Now, I think that might have calmed him down. Might have just said, well, you're on a yellow card now and not go into that rash challenge. But unfortunately, Paul did go into that rash challenge and got injured. And I think all the lads thought, oh, my God, we haven't got a chance now. But something we'll touch on later. I've just been through too much not just to give up and say we've lost because Gazza's gone off. And I thought, no, I'm going to do everything I can to try and turn this round because I may never play in an FA Cup final again. And we're talking about when the FA Cup was a coveted trophy. So, you know, as a kid, you'd look at the FA Cup final days and it'd be on all day on TV. And, you know, it was a great competition. And I just didn't want to accept because Paul had injured himself and gone off that was it. The game was over.
It's funny you say that. We were speaking with Kev Campbell just a couple of weeks back about the magic of the FA Cup and how, you know, as a kid, as a player, of course, there was all of the things for you guys, you know, the suit fittings, the FA Cup songs and all of that. But for the fans, it was a day in front of grandstand or whatever you chose from the day, all day.
Not just for us, Pete, though. You know, when we beat Arsenal in the semis and 6 weeks then we had before the final and players were obviously, the media wanted every part of them they could get and they were pulled all over the place, but anybody that worked at the club, whether it be the lady that washes the kit, whether it be the admin staff, the ticket office, they were all buzzing as well. So there was a pause totally around the ground where everybody embraced it, and we had that at Spurs, and I think that was massively important for us to go into that final, you know. But I do agree with you as well, you know, the fans are looking forward to it immensely as well. But the 6 weeks leading up to it wasn't just about the players; it was about everybody that worked at the club.
Brilliant, absolutely fascinating. Speaking of Gaza, yours and his move to Spurs, I've analysed it. It's got quite a few similarities. Talented young Northern lads moving to the bright lights. Was it tough at first at Tottenham?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, I think it was tough to move to. Do you know? I say this still. There is a north and south divide. You know, in terms of differences between the you know, Southerners and Northerners. I sort of get it now because I stayed there for 4.5 years almost, and initially it was very difficult to understand the way of life and the way of living. Sure. But then when you stay there and you give it a chance, You understand why it's like it is, and it's great down there, honestly. But initially, for me, it was a really tough move. I was only 21, 22 years of age as well, you know what I mean? And I know it's, when you look at some of the players now, it's not young, but I think the support network around the young players now, when they're making these big moves, is far different than when it was from when I moved down there. It was simply find yourself a house, bring your family down, settle in, and come to training. Now they have so many people around them, advisors, they even bring their families and friends over. I mean, some of the things they do. But yeah, it was difficult. I see Rad's just come in from...
Yeah, Rad's here. We've got his question for you later on in the show. Great to
Hi,
have him
Rad.
on board. He does such a lot of work for the Spurs boys out here in Dubai. Great supporters club he does, and he's a big fan of Hollywood Ball. So thanks to him for being with us this evening.
It can be a nuisance as well, though, can't it, Pete?
When he gets on about Spurs, yes, he can indeed. And I switch him. Rad, I'm going to have to tell you, I put you on mute when Newcastle play Spurs, because we very rarely beat you. Listen, Paul, I don't want to touch on Liverpool too much. It's the club after I want to focus on. I want to talk about Sunderland. We were talking about them off air, and I'll expand on that. But I mean, it's well documented. Your time at Liverpool didn't work out, but Sunderland were something of a godsend, weren't they? Because they believed in you, and they came and rescued you from Liverpool.
I think, well, yeah. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, Peter Reedy was manager, and I actually went on loan a few months before, and in my first game, I did my knee ligaments in. And I thought, oh my God, that's my chance over again. I wasn't looking after myself at Liverpool, it's been well documented. Reedy said to me that not to worry, that I'd get myself fit and he'll come back in for me. And he was true to his word. I got a fitness regime in the summer whereby I was training for 3 hours a day in the gym and running. And I got to play back in the Premiership, and and I look at, you talk about FA Cup winners' medals and England caps. For me, that was probably more gratifying. Purely and simply, I'd been written off. Nobody wanted to touch me. I was this cokehead drinking, self-destruct individual that everybody wanted to avoid. But Reedy really did. Stuck by me, and even when I left, he wanted to keep me there, but it was again, I was living away from home, and we weren't doing so well in the Premiership. It was all there for everyone to see. But it's nice when somebody has that faith in you. And again, he's another person that I've remained friendly with since I finished playing.
An absolute legend and people say old school, but what I loved about reading about your time at Sunderland was you said that through all the clubs that you've been with and been at, and some great clubs along the way, the togetherness at Sunderland was absolutely outstanding, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And again, you had another great captain there, Kevin Ball.
Ball,
not the most gifted player, I'll be honest, but 110%, but exemplary off the field and on the field. You wouldn't want to go up against him. Let me tell you, he's a lad that can put it about. And then you did have people like Tony Coton and Niall Quinn involved that added that took the edge off. The seriousness. We had a bit of a laugh. We used to take the mickey out of each other, and it was just that really good balance of individuals, young players, old heads, and because you've got to enjoy the game. You've got to enjoy the game. There's no point in coming, week in, week out, and you can't play a game that you're getting paid for and not enjoy it, and going in every day and training for a game that you love when everyone else is struggling for jobs and struggling to make ends meet, and nowhere like Newcastle and the North East is, sometimes it's a release for them. It's a release for the fans, isn't it? At the weekend,
Exactly.
They can go and watch their teams, and you should accept that that's a massive responsibility, Pete.
Absolutely. I mean, it's. You said Kevin Ball there. I've had Kevin Ball on the show, and even I was frightened interviewing him. What a character, absolutely. And boy, did he let me know throughout the half an hour that we had him on about Newcastle. He would stick at it every time. You got a good story about Kevin Ball. Tell us about the polo shirts for away days.
Well, that's why I was saying, you needed that bit of release.
I love this.
And back then, we had one tracksuit to travel in. Yeah. And one polo shirt to travel in and one to go to the game in, and they were red and white. And Bally was attentive about everything. But what would happen on the Friday after training, the gaffer would get us in and he would tell us, right, it's red to travel in, white to the game. Well, because we knew I was like onto it with Bally, I said, look, lads, in the changing room while Bally wasn't there, I said, when Reedy tells us what shirt to wear, I'm going to say, whatever colour he says, okay, are we wearing the white one then? And let him confirm that. Then we'd meet at the train station. We'd all have red on, but Bally would have a white one on. And
I bet he loved that.
He would insist that we were all wrong. And that went on for most of the season, It wasn't just the once, but it was. But that's what I'm saying. It was part of the togetherness. But I wouldn't dare tell Bally what was happening because he would have killed me. I would have left it to Niall Quinn, who's 6'5", and said, "You tell him. I'll be in the piano with the lid down."
Oh, brilliant! Listen, we used to do quizzes here in Dubai, sports quizzes, and I was looking at. There's a great quiz question that can be used for yourself. One of the few players who featured in a Manchester, Mersey, North London, and Tyne and Wear derby. I've got to ask you though, as a Newcastle boy and a North East boy, how does the tune against Sunderland compare to the other derbies that you've played in?
Well, do you know what? If you're ever in a pub and you're asked that question, right, you say yes to all of them that you've just mentioned. But I never played in a Manchester derby.
Right. Okay.
I played in a testimonial.
Okay.
But I never played in a Manchester derby. But for some reason, the record books say that I did. So if you go in a pub and you're asked the question, it is going back to because I played in, as I say, the North East. I played in a Midlands derby with West Brom and Wolves. Played down in London in the London derby. So then with Crystal Palace. So I did play in a few what they call derbies, but. And the Liverpool-Everton one, and they're all different, I suppose the intensity prior to the game for the players is the same. Everybody wants to do well because they want the fans to have the bragging rights. But when you look at Liverpool, the fans are travelling to the game together. Do you know? It's like no other derby that you would come across. The Tottenham Arsenal one is pure. It's pure hatred between each of them, but with a few quid. You know what I mean? So it's like handbags at 10 paces type of thing. But then you go up to the North East, and boy, are they! It's fever pitch. It's fever pitch, and you can feel it. You can feel the passion more than any of them. On the even the lead up to it, you feel like I better not let this town down because I'll never be allowed back. So they are all intense, but in their own different ways, Pete.
It's fascinating to hear. I mean, I took my brother-in-law. We were back in the Northeast. He's a Southerner, QPR fan. And I took him to Newcastle against Sunderland, and we were dropped off in the city centre before the game. Of course, it was a midday kick-off, something you would be aware of on police advice, of course. And he said, "There's riot police here." I said, "Yeah, of course there is." I said, "They're walking us up to the ground." I said, "It's a bubble. We're not allowed to. They'll escort us to the ground." He said, "But we're the home fans." I said, "Yeah, it doesn't matter." And again, that's what people. It is that way inclined. And then you mentioned the Merseyside derby, and you've got families and families that sit in a stand together. Yeah.
It's bizarre. You're going to have to give me 1 second. I'll be 2 seconds, guys.
No problem. Great to have everyone in the house. Patrick Bright with us. Thomason, as we've said, who loves the show. Chicotie's in as well. He's asking which of the clubs that Paul played for did he think he was seen as a favourite. There's probably too many to mention, Chicotie. We've had both 2 codes out. They're done as well. And Jane's in the house. Jane, nice to have you along. Paul, I've got to say, I've got to touch on, making your England debut. It's got to be up there, hasn't it? Because it's every kid's dream. Have you got memories of the occasion?
Yeah, I do, and you know what? Like you said, if somebody had told me when I was a young boy I'd represented my country, I would have gone, oh, you know what? That's all I ever wanted. That's why I played the game.
Yeah,
it was a little bit marred. I wasn't going through the best of times. I turned up drunk to the first get together, if I'm honest, but. I'd slightly gone off. I'd gone off the rails at that time, and it was just the beginning of sort of my demise in terms of my football career. When I look back, major regrets, because I think I could have played more times for England, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I agree.
I was just not in a good place when all that started to come to fruition. I wasn't, the admiration and the way that people adored you, especially after the cup final and how I was doing, I struggled to handle. There were things going on in my mind and in my head that I was struggling with, and the press and the popularity, if you will, was something that
was an added. It was an added struggle as well, having that spotlight.
I just wanted to hide away, I just wanted to curl up in a ball, if you will, and just not get involved. But as you know, I masked it with other vices.
Yes, you did. Listen, we can't have you on the show and not touch on the seriously amazing and powerful novel. 2016, you were reading the paper and you saw the news about a footballer at that time, and it was there and then you thought about portraying and coming out and telling everyone about your horrific past that affected you so brutally and led to the demons that you've just discussed. Was that sort of such a pivotal moment in 2016? You thought, right, it's my turn to try and help other people?
Yeah, I mean, when and I work an awful lot with the Football League now, the EFL clubs. I go and deliver safeguarding sessions and workshops for the academies, and that's when I saw this article. I hadn't heard of the player myself. He played at Crewe, he played at Bury, but I read the story. It was like reading my own life story, but I just felt that I had to support him, and the reason being that I thought that it would just get brushed under the carpet because he'd not played at the top level, which would have been a disgrace. But you know what the media are like, and I just felt I had a duty to support him from the onset. And so when I came forward, I didn't expect the tsunami of individuals to follow me, which led to massive changes within the game. Now, I mean, the first instance, I used to, people used to ask me to go and tell my story. I'd tell my story, then people would pity me, feel sorry for me, and I just got to a stage where that wasn't why I came forward. I came forward in order to help and educate people and coaches and youngsters around the dangers of all kinds of abuse. When we look at it now, you've got your online abuse, you've got your racial abuse. So I now have sort of switched it from just my story to educating these youngsters. And it's funny, I open up with, because I deal with under 16s to under 23s, and the young kids and they come and they sit there, and I open up with, I know what you're thinking, lads. You've been training today. You want to get home for your tea, and you don't want to listen to a fat ex-footballer going on about safeguarding. But I just say to him, just give me 45 minutes, an hour, and I'll give you some tools to go on your journey that might help you, because you've seen my stats and the teams I played for. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it one bit. Do you know, I was troubled all the way through it. And what I want to say to you, and want to give you some tools so that you enjoy the experience. You're in a position that millions of kids would die for.
Absolutely.
You need to enjoy the experience. You need to enjoy the experience. And so hopefully, coming from somebody that's played the game and been where they are, it sort of resonates with them. And I think it does, because, like I say, I'm up in Sunderland soon for 3 days with the academy. So, you know, I think I'm making a difference. I've developed an online safeguarding course that's going to be released, and had some real support from colleagues from the game. So, you know, I just want to make sure that I didn't come forward in vain, Pete. That's what I didn't. You know, I want to make sure that I'm helping and making a difference out there.
You're certainly making a difference. I mean, I retweeted yesterday, and already people were looking at it. There's a GoFundMe page out there, because you're doing so much work. You already smashed your original target. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I during lockdown, everyone suffered, didn't they? And we know that it was hard for many. But what happened? The abuse on young lads, youngsters, not just lads, girls, increased massively at home, and the statistics were horrendous. And I thought, what I'll do is I'll align myself with, they are the NSPCC, but in particular Childline, because I wanted to do something so that them children, so as much as it's raising money, it's raising awareness for them kids to know that they can ring somebody up if they're struggling. Because the statistics went so high, I just thought about them poor kids that must be suffering, and I wanted them to think and realise that they've got they can call someone.
Okay.
So I've now aligned myself with Childline full time. So I'm doing many events for them this coming season, and you know, I'll continue. And if people feel that they can, as I put, and I did smash the record, but as I said, if people can just donate £1 or £100, it doesn't matter to me. That is a massive help, because they've struggled obviously through the pandemic to, you know, because they are a charity, and you know, I will continue to support Childline in particular.
Brilliant stuff.
For obvious reasons.
Absolutely. Now, listen. Before we go, we can't go without having a listen. As we said, Rad's got a question for you, and here it is.
Paul Stewart, how are you? Rad here. It's been a while, mate, since we saw you in Dubai. Fantastic evening and a fantastic time we had together with you and the UAE Spurs Supporters Club. Really was to remember the times we had, and we hope you're keeping well. And Andros Townsend says his regards, actually. So you know, you might want to fill Peter in on that story. He'll probably find it amusing. And the question I have for you is really regarding Tottenham this season. What are your expectations, and how do you think they'll get on in terms of where they finish the league, or maybe a cup run, or in Europe? Let us know your thoughts, and keep well and take care, mate. All the best. Cheers. Bye-bye.
So, Rod's question to you is, how do you see Spurs season going? Can they be up there for Champions League, or is Cup their best bet?
Well, I think I'll just explain why the Andros Townsend thing come. I don't know whether he told you guys, but when I went over there to do a talk for the supporters club, one of his best mates, believe it or not, pulled me beforehand and said, "Look, we're going to get questions from the audience, but one of us is going to say, who's your favourite player of all time at Spurs?" Now, Rad dislikes Andreas Townsend,
Okay.
like beyond belief. So they asked me to say Andreas Townsend. So when I was asked the question, I came back with Andreas Townsend. I'm forever on social media now. I'm sending him like, oh, Spurs are in for Andreas. Oh, did you see the goal he scored at Everton the other week? And yeah, so it is sort of an in-joke, but
an in-joke which has been shared amongst the community.
Shared, but on the night it was funny. Right, going on to Spurs. Oh, God, I'd love to give you guys great news. I mean, the great news was that Harry stayed. The flip side is I see him being so inconsistent and not challenging. I was worried and said publicly, so anyone can sort of respond to this. I said on TalkSport that I feared, because they hadn't signed anyone, that they may struggle, from fighting relegation if Harry goes. And I thought Sonny might have followed as well, because I can't believe there isn't a lot. Thankfully, he stayed, and I can't believe there wasn't a lot of teams in for him. But look, they stayed. I just see him being inconsistent. Right. Europa is going to be my answer, but do you know what, Tottenham, and what disappoints me, Pete, is that success now is making it into the Champions League.
Yeah.
You know what? For me, that isn't success. What success is trophies, medals in your cabinet, and we put too much weight on, getting into the qualification. And I know it's money wise and TV wise for the clubs. That's great, but we had the opportunity under Pochettino to step up and really go for that top spot, and the directors and the owners didn't back him, and that's why it went awry. And I think that the club are just, they're probably a selling club. They're probably a club that are not going to compete at the highest level because the people that own it and are in charge of it are frightened of investing like the clubs that are up there at the moment. That's my true answer.
It sounds like a familiar story from where I'm from as well, Paul. Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Fascinating to hear about that career. Love the Sunderland stuff. And, I think what's nice is that got a lot of Sunderland fans who are friends as well, to hear that because Lee Clark played there as well, and he won Player of the Season when he was there, and they had such a great side, and to see them where they are, we were just talking off air, it's crazy that a set up like that, and hopefully they can come back up so we can get those derbies going again.
That's what you want. That's what you look forward to. Release, it's a release from the tough weeks that we have. And, it might only be 2 games a season unless you get them in the cup, Pete. But, it's that bit of relief from the you-know-what that surrounds us all at the moment.
Exactly. That's the end of our first Legend series. What a way to start, by the way, Paul. We can't thank you enough. And we won't be leaving it as long. We won't be leaving it as long the next time. No. Ladies and gents, the fantastic Paul Stewart.
Thanks, guys. Take care.